Let's do that again now that my headphones are on. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Movie Club. Happy May the 4th for all of us Star Wars aficionados. May the 4th be with you. Happy Star Wars Day. Thank you so much for jumping onto the chat. Everybody who's here, those who are watching at home, welcome, welcome. And those who are maybe watching at a different time than Mondays, welcome to our live stream on our discussion of the Prince of Egypt. We hope you have a great time learning everything that we're learning and going about just discussing within your own homes. And I hope you're enjoying the movies that we're picking at this moment. So welcome, welcome, everybody. Glad to see some of our regulars in the chat as well as a few newcomers. Just wanted to get started today. Just as a reminder for any new teens, so those under the age of 18, please make sure that all teenagers participating, those under 18, have their parent or guardian fill out the Google form. I'm going to post that again in chat just now, just so that you can fully participate in this movie club as well as all future movie clubs. If you have already done that, if your parents already signed you up with the permission form, you are already covered. We have that information already, so thank you so much for doing that. We're really looking forward to having this conversation tonight and everything going on. As we continue on with kind of announcements and things, let me just do a reminder of the guidelines. Remember to share things about Movie Club. We want to grow our community and grow our expanse. That includes even these videos. If there's something that you're watching on now and you want to share this discussion or even the final thoughts or even what's happening in the live chat with other friends, feel free to share this link with other people throughout the week so they can see what's going on. It might feel a bit overwhelming to come on and be fully participant. So if you wanted to give a sneak peek to friends, family, feel free to give them links to these things because it stays live on my channel in future so people can watch. Feel free to participate in Movie Club, watching the movies, discussing at home, and all those other things. Thank you, Amy. Feel free to also subscribe. This is my YU, Youth Unlimited, Toronto Youth for Christ YouTube that's connected to my work with YFC. And so feel free to subscribe. Everything that will be uploaded. I also upload ministry updates in regards to Doxa and things along those lines as well. And as well, be kind and loving to one another as you have always been, but continue to be that welcoming community for one another as we continue to move forward with Movie Club. So at this point, I'm not going to forget this time. We're just going to start off the bat. Every movie club, we talk about what happens in the movie. So if you have not seen The Prince of Egypt or you do not want to be spoiled with anything of The Prince of Egypt, just be warned that spoilers may be discussed during this live stream. So feel free to, if you're watching this at a future date, pause and you can catch up with us at another time. Or just be aware that some parts of the plot may be spoiled for you. So that was all that I'm going to say for that. And we will just move on to our first question, which we all kind of know. I like to start off. What snack did you have while watching the movie this week? I myself enjoyed some chocolate chip cookies, so much so that I don't have a prop this week because I don't have any cookies to share. So I ate them all this week while watching the movie. So yeah, how do we say it? Munching on Cheetos, I see. That's a great option. I know my husband would approve on that. Mint chip ice cream. My husband would also approve of that. That's an excellent one. Yes, I did eat them all, but I didn't eat like 2 dozen. I had like 3 or 4. So it was a special treat that we got from things. So that's a dinner. That's a good one too. So that's all very well and good. So I'm glad you guys are still enjoying and treating yourselves during this time and treating yourself. Movies are a great opportunity to just do a little self-care, do something for yourself. And even for those around you, if you're watching with people like friends or loved ones, having their favorite snack is a good way to kind of encourage them through that and just be a little bit more loving. So we're just going to get started with kind of a topic of the Prince of Egypt. Which miracle of God shown in the film most amazed or surprised you in the film? So take a second. I know there were lots of different kind of miracles, miraculous acts, signs that were depicted of what God did. And so I just wanted to kind of open it up and say which of those kind of more supernatural, more miraculous signs the most surprised you or the most amazed you, that actually took place. So those of you watching at home or taking part at a future date, I just allow these little times for people in the stream to be able to comment and things along those lines. So it's not that nothing's happening. We're just waiting for feedback and things. And I just don't want it to be just my big talking head. I want this to be a participating thing. So we're just allowing those in the chat to gather their thoughts and things. So a lot of things coming in. The boils on the animals, absolutely. The splitting of the Red Sea, I agree, animated very well. I feel like they got the right amount of what would have been awesome, but also like kind of terrifying at the exact same point. Yeah, the boils on the animals, there were boils and there were sick animals, so there might have been a bit of each. The livestock being killed, the plagues, absolutely. I'm always really like during the story of Moses and the Egyptians and freeing the people, it's the turning the Nile to blood that always kind of takes me back a bit and surprises me. And even rewatching this movie, it was like the reality of that and like seeing those guards completely terrified. I'm like, yeah, I'd be scared too. Like that would be horrific to see basically your clean water source completely turned undrinkable, unusable, and things along those well. So that seems to be mine. That always kind of like takes me back a bit. And seeing it kind of animated the way it did was quite something, for sure. Great answers. Thank you, everybody. Our second question, what are some changes that Dreamworks, so the studio that put on The Prince of Egypt, made to the story of Moses and Exodus? So for some of us who may be more familiar with the story of Moses and how it's told in Exodus, what were some things that maybe you noticed that were different from your recollection of that story, or maybe your family dove into what Exodus says and figured out what was different? I actually took a little bit of time. I didn't get through the whole story, but I definitely took a little bit of time and kind of looked into, okay, what were some of those things that didn't really make it in? So I'm going to pull up my notes as well, because while everyone is going through it. So some things coming to, they made him break the nose of the statue. Yep, no biblical proof of the nose breaking the statue, or even like Moses being kind of the prankster that he was. We don't get a lot of insight into that. That was quite the creative outlook for that. The name of Moses' brother, no, Moses' brother was Aaron. Aaron was correct. Aaron. And he later becomes like pivotal to the priesthood of Israel later on. So that was it. Ramses be Moses' brother. Yes. The one thing that I always found very interesting is that Moses went off in the wilderness and married Zipporah, and Zipporah and him like had a family and had kids and lived a long time. Like Moses didn't come back to Egypt until it says, where is it? So in Exodus 7, it says that Moses was an old man. He was 80 and Aaron was 83. And clearly, unless Moses ages extremely well, he was not 80 in this depiction of him. So that was definitely something that was very, that always kind of struck me. It was like, I thought he was older, and he was. He was an old guy. He was 80 years old. Yeah, so that's in Exodus. Exact thing would be Exodus 7:7 is where you find that fact. So the other things that were said that you guys picked up on, Miriam, that Zipporah comes with Moses, and that Aaron and Miriam and the slaves. Uh, yeah, it's Miriam and Aaron were there, and Zephora. Let me take a look. I'm just seeing. It's true that Zephora had sons, and Zephora and his family went back to Egypt to free the Hebrews. That's we read that in Exodus 2:3 when they go. And actually, you're right. Ramses being Moses' brother isn't accurate because when Moses killed the Egyptian slave, uh, I don't know how he's described in the Bible, but basically the slave driver. Um, Pharaoh is so enraged that Moses has to flee for his life because Pharaoh is going to kill Moses. Um, so that, and then it wasn't until that Pharaoh died did God go, okay, no one's going to kill you anymore. You can go back. So the Pharaoh that Moses stands in front of and does the plagues and serpent into a staff into a serpent and all this other stuff, those things actually take place in front of a different Pharaoh that would have had really no relationship to Moses. I do like the idea, though, that there would have been this brotherly conflict, though. Um, and so that was that. Um, some other things. The two magicians. Yep, absolutely. Dapper Q. Welcome. Um, yep, two magicians. There were, Pharaoh did have people who were trying to mimic and counteract, but we don't have any kind of recollection of specific magicians or specific sorcerers. And that was things. Miss that. Yeah, Charlene made a good point, but then it went missing, so I don't know what happened. I don't know. That might have been YouTube algorithm, or maybe Charlene wanted to do some spell check. I didn't get a chance to take a look. Um, but yeah, it was good. So there's a lot of things. So just an important fact that like Dreamworks did a lot of work making sure that key pieces of the story were taking place, like the burning bush and the things that happened there, as well as other things. But some of these other things, like the relationship between Pharaoh and Moses, how he grew up, even like the timeline of things. We also know that immediately after the Red Sea, they didn't have, they were wandering out in the wilderness a little bit before the Ten Commandments happened. It wouldn't have been an immediate scenario. So there's a few different things. I would encourage you, if you're at all interested in looking into what are the differences, even just a brief skim through is very interesting. It took me down a little bit of an interesting Bible study this past week. So this story can actually be found starting in Exodus 2, Exodus chapter 2, so the second book of the Bible, Exodus chapter 2, and you read past, I think it goes until about chapter 10, 11, 12. Yeah. So, right. So, good point, Dapper Q. The golden calf is completely missed. That's the whole upset there. Things along those lines. Yeah. And it was Pharaoh's, good point, Charlene. It was Pharaoh's daughter that found Moses, not his wife. So there wouldn't have been a sibling relationship. But yeah, so if you want to do your own study and kind of look into and kind of examine, what were the things that stayed, what were the things that went, I encourage you, like, take a read of those couple chapters. If you don't want to sit down at one time, maybe make it like a week Bible study for yourself, and see what kind of the differences are. It's really interesting when we see biblical stories like this that are adapted creatively for a mainstream audience, right? For those who may not have Sunday school background or church background or even passage of scripture background. And so I really appreciated that this studio took the care to look at religious leaders and heard out some things. I also understand that they are a movie studio, a secular movie studio, and so it's not going to be a word-for-word recreation, but a creative adaptation of the story. But I still think that the story does justice to major themes and major plot points of Moses' journey through that. So yeah, excellent. Well done. Good picking out some of that stuff. I'm really impressed with how you all did that. Excellent. Moses is seen caring for the Egyptians while God sent the plagues. Do you believe Moses would have felt this way? Why or why not? So I noticed that during the plagues and during the song of "Once I Called You Brother," while the plagues were happening, there was this kind of like he felt really bad for the innocence of Egypt. That if Pharaoh had just let his people go, the innocence of Egypt wouldn't suffer. And even like his hesitation to want to act out and be the instrument of God. So I just kind of open it up. It's not a we know for sure, we don't know for sure, but from what we do know, do you think Moses might have had this kind of internal conflict? And for those watching at a future date or later on tonight, feel free to put down in the comments any other areas in which the Dreamworks story of the Prince of Egypt and the biblical story of what happened to Moses in Egypt differ. Feel free to write that in the comments and take part in what we're talking about. So Dapper Q, yes. If you have any thoughts of why you think he would have been conflicted, feel free to share, or why you don't think he would have been conflicted at all. Just give a few minutes. Sipping on tea. I apologize. Just give a few more seconds. There might be some people typing out answers. I don't want them to miss out on taking part. Renee, more or less innocent people were being seriously hurt, right? I don't think he would have been completely unsympathetic. You're right. It would have been this conflict because they did enslave, like they were willing participants in the slavery of Hebrews. I think his heart would have broken for the Egyptians. I think from what we know biblically, Moses needed a very big confidence boost to even go and speak to Pharaoh. When the burning bush, God from the bush kind of calls him to go speak to Pharaoh, that happens in Exodus 3, 4, 5, when he finally goes speak to Pharaoh. There's a lot of like hesitation, of fear, of why me? I don't know. And so my thought would be maybe. I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, if he grew up feeling Egyptian or being in that kind of place, then, and kind of understanding where they come from, then I can see him being conflicted. Yeah, at Deerfield, being conflicted about those he grew up with or those who raised him. But also, I'm also kind of like, but he knows who God is at that point. Like, he's seen so much and done and been able to do so much because of God. And so I'm always kind of, the story of Moses has always kind of put me in a place where it's like, we care for those that desire more, but, and who are punished. But then we also know that like God's will is always right, even though it's hard for us to understand. I think he was a kind person. He didn't want to hurt non-guilty people, for sure. Yeah, it's a difficult thing for us to grasp, right? And conflicts that involve full nations, there's always good and bad people. I mean, on both sides. But we know here, like, God had a plan, and he knew it had to be acted out this way. And so I was just curious, because they depicted him in such a conflicted, which made you feel for Moses, like, oh gosh, that would have been hard. So I just wondered what other Christians thought and what other thing people would have thought. Excellent. Thanks, guys, for your thoughts. Okay, final question of the night, and then I'll do a final thought because I don't want to keep you guys too late. So what happens to the Israelites after the Prince of Egypt? So what happens once, the final chord of the final song is played after the Prince of Egypt? What do you know, or what do you think happens to the Israelites? I know we touched a bit of it before when we were talking about the differences in both biblical and film adaptation, but just wanted to dig into. Yep, there's a lot of wandering in the desert, which we saw kind of Moses go through when he left Egypt the first time. Not a very, deserts we know aren't hospitable, but really not hospitable. Good point. Also, Dapper Q, like straight further from God. An excellent point, Amy. Like, was told to go to this promised land, and Moses didn't even make it. Like, they were wandering for that long. Which makes sense if he was 80 when the freeing of Israel started, right? Wow, what a thought. Interesting. I'll read Amy's comment. I read in my study today that they called it the longest funeral march. Yeah, a little bit. It's a bit sad. But also, like, Israelites weren't totally faithful. Like, they go in the wilderness and they go, we need a God. Oh yeah, let's make a calf. A golden calf idol. While Moses is up trying to, like, talking to the real God, and then he comes back and they're all like, look, we found a God. Like, they weren't, after seeing everything they saw and experiencing everything they experienced, they still went back to, we need idols, and we need more than just this one God, and we need all this other stuff. I'm going to share a little insight from me. My favorite Old Testament story is while the Israelites are in the wilderness for their 40 years, and they're wandering, and they start going, oh, we'd rather be back in Egypt because at least we had, like, water. Moses, talk to your God and tell him to get us water. And so he does, and, like, hits the staff in the rock and water flows. Oh, we rather, then, a few days or weeks or however long passes. Oh, we wish we were back in Egypt because at least they fed us. At least we had food. Moses, tell your God to give us food. And, like, so then he goes and he prays for food, and, like, manna, like literal food, raining from the heavens. A little time passes, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it'd be better to be enslaved and die in Egypt because at least we had meat to eat and not just manna, not just bread. Finally, Moses is just like, hands up, like, God, these people you gave me. And my favorite, it's like the exasperation of a parent. Because God just goes and he's just like, meat, I will give them so much meat, it will come out of their nose. It will fall out of their nostrils. Because he's just so upset. Those who may be adults and parents, maybe teens, ask your parents about this. Sometimes you get just so mad you make these, like, over exaggerations. Like, you want this, I'll give you so much candy, you'll never want candy again, right? Like, those types of things. I could just see God doing that in this moment. And then he does. Then, like, quail comes and all this quail falls, and it's way too much bird meat that they can't even, like, get any of it before it spoils. That is found in Deuteronomy. I will find the exact annotations, the quotations, and put that down in the comments if you want to read it. It is my favorite passage of Old Testament because it just shows how patient and forgiving God is, and he continues to do things for us. And I still to this day can't believe that they would say, like, we'd rather be enslaved than not have X. And it was just like, you're talking slavery. Like, what? And so, yeah, it's just, yeah, kind of human nature to be purposely forgetting, um, purposely forgetful of what God does for us. And that happens constantly. We do that. Israelites do that. All this other business. And so it was just, they leave it, like Dreamworks leaves it kind of this perfect, like, and then they were all happy and they got the 10 Commandments. And I'm like, no, lots more suffering, lots more unfaithfulness, lots more of God's forgiveness and mercy, and a little bit of judgment when it has to be done, and things along those lines. And so it's just, for me, always a good reminder that, like, life is not just about getting to, like, the next happy ending. Like, there's always going to be struggle, and there's always going to be times we forget, and times that those things happen. And kind of interesting to see that you can see all these, like, great wonders and works and plagues, and God coming down as, like, a tornado of fire, like, freeing you from Egyptians, and he does all this stuff, and then you complain that there's not as much water. Like, just the way us humans are, I guess. So for my final thought, just to kind of separate it a bit, has to do with this idea of, what does it mean to be sent? And what does it mean to answer God's call? I mean, Moses went, found a bush that was burning but not consumed, and when the voice of God spoke, he said, "Here I am." And he's not the first one in the Bible, nor the last. And so I pulled this from actually when Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, was called by God. And these were his words. And so then I heard a voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, Lord, send me." And I know for myself, who works within the mission field, we often talk about serving others and being a missionary, even being a pastor, as a calling where we go, "Here I am, send me." But I think a lot of us who are in kind of church leadership or kind of those vocational, that's what we call a vocational role, we'd even say we feel inadequate sometimes. We feel like Moses, where we go, "Me? You want me to go do this thing? Are you sure?" Because there are other people who, like, better public speakers and, could do better. And I know when I first started out in junior high ministry, I'm like, I'm way too awkward. Like, I can't do that. And so we all have kind of these moments, but even bigger than that is we're all called as God's people to do more, and called to go where God sends us, whatever that might look like. Some of us are called to be ushers and greeters at our churches. And you might have people in your own local congregations that you go, they've been on the worship team for as long as I can remember, or they've been, a Sunday school teacher forever, or they've been a youth volunteer, or they've helped out with coffee time or fellowship time or home care, or name different volunteer position here for the longest time. And I just want to encourage you, like, a call doesn't have to be something where you drop everything and you do it. There are so many, I believe, even people like yourselves out there that have gifts and abilities and are giving back in a way that God's called you. And so if you want to share, because I know this kind of puts people on the spot, or they might feel overwhelmed, but if you want to share in chat, what is something that God's called you to, that you've said, "Here I am"? What is something that God has said, I want to use that gift, that ability, that talent, and use it for my kingdom, use it for my will, and I'm going to send you to do this thing? Have you received a call like that? And if you're watching at a future date, maybe in the comments, like if there's a time where you feel like God has called you, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to share stories about that. So as people are writing, I'll just read a couple. Doing acting at church for Christmas pageants. That's a great way. Spreading the truth of the gospel and who Jesus is through your acting ability. That's awesome. Felt a calling to have people in our home. Absolutely. Like there's truly a gift of hospitality that some people have. And so thank you for sharing that gift with others in our community. Caring for those on the sidelines, absolutely. The heart for mercy for those who might feel left out, those who are kind of outcast or just easily fly under the radar. Thank you. Thank you for serving that way. I know for myself, I've been called to professional ministry. But I know so many other people in my life that have been actively influenced how I serve and how I give, that were, friends of my parents. Growing up, I was at a church and there were 3 ladies at the church and they adopted me in as their own people. And I called them Auntie Bonnie, Auntie Marjorie, Auntie Bonnie, and Grandma Jessie. And they just took me in as a daughter, as a child, and taught me what it was to be a woman of the church. And they served coffee, they sang in choir, they did what some people would think is typical church things. But for me, it meant the world because it showed me where to go and what to do, and that any little, what I felt little talent could mean a whole lot to somebody else. And so those who have shared ways that they're serving, ways that they've heard God's call and said, here I am, send me. Thank you. Thank you for answering that call. Thank you for being bold enough and courageous enough and really just trusting enough to do that. We really appreciate it. All of us in the community, your local community as well as your global community. Appreciate that. Those who haven't, I've been there. I think all of us and those who still have ways that we feel called have had those moments where we're just like, I have no idea. Tammy, thank you for being honest and just saying, I'm still praying to God to help me find my gifts. Absolutely. Share that with a mentor, a pastor, a friend who can pray along with you for that. Some people find it fairly quick. Other people's it takes some time, and that's okay. If you're looking for advice, my advice would try something that you really like doing. You like meeting new people? Join the usher or greeting team so you can shake hands and get to know names. If you're a baker or you like being hospitable, maybe opening up your home or, making food for food banks or for baking things or fellowship times. If you're a person who's really into like tech or sound, offer to help out for pageants or just regular Sunday service. Or if you're into, or even like web design, like seeing if there's a way you can give back that way. Or if you want to know what it's like being with kids, just volunteer as a Sunday school teacher. I bet there's a way for people to volunteer with Sunday school or things. Even now, like as we're all kind of staying at home and things. If you have a talent or ability that you want to share, like I would just encourage you to find a place that in your own local context that will allow you to share that and try things out. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But just to be open. I think it's easy for us to get bogged down and think it's got to be this, like Isaiah and Moses, this voice that calls to us and says, who will I send? I'm calling you. And sometimes it is that, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just being open enough to see a person who's struggling and going, I can help. Or seeing a place in whatever context you're in where, we could really use a youth band and start something. Or, I really like what those people are doing. Let me jump onto that. So let me just encourage even those watching, if you're kind of maybe not struggling, but considering what it means to be called, jump in. Especially at a time like this when we're all social distancing and staying at home and things along those lines. I bet if we reached out to our pastors and leaders and elders of our own churches and said, is there anything I could do to help? It can go a long way. Sometimes a smile can be just what a person needs. Absolutely. So one thing that I really like this time is just to call people up. I like calling or texting people up a lot and just being like, how are you today? I've been doing that with my essential services people, like those who drop off packages and food and grocery store workers and pharmacist workers and things like that. Just being happy seems to go a really long way. So yeah, that's my final thought for today. Thank you so much, all of you, for participating in tonight. I really hope you enjoyed the movie. I know watching it again reminded me how much I loved this movie when it first came out. I wasn't quite a preteen yet, but I loved it so much. Like, I bought the soundtrack on CD and things. I'm also quite the musical theater nerd, and so thank you so much for sharing. So for next week, we are going to be diving into another movie. And this movie is one that was suggested by the community. So I'm glad I got to finally. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to put them in the chat, post them in the comments, even like tagging or commenting on Instagram or Facebook, things that you would like. So this week's movie is Inside Out, Disney Pixar's Inside Out from, I believe it was 2015. It's a really, for those who have seen it, a really amazing film. For those who haven't seen it, it's a really interesting way of looking at how our minds mature and how growing up can actually impact us mentally. I'm trying to put together a workshop for parents and leaders and adults about middle school development, about kids going through transition from childhood into teenagehood. And a lot of the things that are mentioned in Inside Out is very accurate to how mentally we develop as people. And so I just figured it might be an interesting. I love that it was suggested by the community. Thank you. And it was just I think it would be a really interesting take for what teens see, what parents see, what youth leaders see, and having kind of that discussion about what kind of power and what role do our emotions play as people of Jesus, as people of Christ. So feel free. I'll be posting the discussion questions with those down below, as well as the poster and questions on my Instagram and Facebook page following the hashtag Monday Movie Club. Thank you so much for watching tonight and being a part of tonight. I really enjoy hearing all your insights and getting your feedback. Thank you so much for everyone participating in the chat. Just a reminder again, for those who are under the age of 18, please get your parents to fill out the permission forms. It's an important piece of us carrying on our ministry here, just with what we're doing here. And so thank you. Thank you for being a part of tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful week and enjoy Inside Out. And I look forward to seeing you next Monday for our live stream. Take care.